well-known, famously recognized school, the University of Chicago. Well known along with its sister school of Northwestern University, also in Chicago, and closely connected to the University of Michigan. University of Chicago was well known for its study of anthropology and world history, attended by many world leaders and politicians alike for a very particular reason.
On the other hand, if you take anthropology, I think goes the other way around. You start with something that is really strange, like, say, something I worked on, cannibalism in the Fiji Island. And that, it's not only strange, but probably repulsive to a lot of us. But I'll start with something that a Fijian chief said to a famous anthropologist in the 1920s. He said, after this chief explained that he was giving a feast to his carpenter who had made a great double canoe for him of a very important item. And he said to his carpenter, "You know, I'm very sorry that I can't give you a raw woman or a cooked man." He said, "But Christianity has spoiled our feasts," he said. So the first thing an anthropologist would wonder about is, you know, what is a cooked man, what is a raw woman, why are they equivalent? And of course, a cooked man is a cannibal victim, and a raw woman is the daughter of a virgin daughter of a chief. The reason they're equivalent, as you find out if you stay there long enough and talk long enough, is that a cooked man is given as a sacrifice to the gods, who thereupon bestow fertility on the people, including the fertility of women and the fertility of the crops, as a benefit of the sacrifice. And a raw woman is a direct means of the reproducing the society. So the two of them are equivalent. That also helps explain why in certain parts of Fiji, in order to betroth a woman, you have to give a fine war club to her younger brother. The fine war club then procures a victim, a cannibal victim, which is the equivalent of him losing his sister. Well, I see some people nodding in agreement, even through this light. What first was repulsive is now something logical, but consider, moreover, that logic is something going on inside you, and that you've been able to incorporate within yourself the way this thing is put together in another society. And you have that privilege because you're human, like the people concerned, and they are meaningfully constructing their existence, and you as a human being can understand and traffic in meanings, given even foreign meanings, given sufficient time and explanation. So anthropologists have the privilege of understanding others in a way that's fundamentally more powerful than any physicist can do, because we can make within our own minds, we can reproduce within our own minds the way that the world is put together for other people. I don't know, I think as an adolescent I read a lot of books about India, about, you know...
You grew up right here in Chicago, right?
Yeah, the crooked tree in the tall pine forest has not spoken with a forked tongue, and things like that. And when I went to college, I decided that I wanted to learn more about Indians and about other peoples. So I declared myself an anthropologist from the beginning, and when I freshman orientation, which was a shock to everybody because nobody knew what anthropology was.
How did you know? I mean, it's one thing to like, you know, be interested in Indians. I mean, this is at a time when anthropology was beginning to make strides in the culture at large, but it was still very early on.
Yeah, I read a few books, anthropologists. many of whom are not worth mentioning now. But I knew that was the field that studied others. There was also something fundamental about crediting other societies. Levi-Strauss once defined anthropologists who criticize their own society by crediting the existence of others. and I've always been sort of critical of our own society in many ways. And I think this pushed me into a study of others and appreciation of the variety of human experience.
And what was it? So you tell us where you went to college and what was it like to study anthropology?
Well, I was first course was Introduction to Anthropology. At that time, maybe there were 30 people in the course. When I taught it, about 8 or 9 years later, there were 400.
University of Michigan.
University of Michigan. We had a compendium of a textbook that talked about the variety of everything, and it was a kind of what we used to call an among the so and so they do this, and among the so and so that, and that was what anthropology primarily was.
There was a lot of that. It was a lot of almost folkloristic a little bit. But you didn't arrive at a moment that you then became a key part of a new systematization, right? Because the way that when I got into anthropology in the 1990s, we thought of the late 40s and 1950s and some of the folks you studied with, people like Leslie White and Julian Stewart, as innovators who were quite tired of the so and so do this, the so and so do that. They had a much bigger project, right?
My primary teacher was Leslie White, who was a famous radical. It turned out he was a closet socialist during the McCarthy era. I didn't know that. Nobody did. That was working there. But he was also a promoter of notions of cultural evolution. And I started off, at least it organized the world into stages and categories of development that had transcended this among the so-and-so type of anthropology. So I did start that way.
But let's stay there for a second, because I've always found so compelling. There was there was a moment of scientific optimism at that moment.
Oh yes.
And can you get, because and the reason I emphasize that, and you know where I'm going, is that right now in anthropology we some of us, or there seems to be a sense of a lack of that kind of optimism. But you guys felt, there were very few of you. It was a small discipline. But you felt, if I understand it, as a true scholarly vanguard. You were gonna really change the way we think about humankind.
We were going to put this on a scientific basis.
And what would that mean? What American anthropology from Franz Boas, in particular, Franz Boas, the founder of American anthropology, but then he went back to France, and he really revolutionized, truly revolutionized anthropology, really starting in the 50s and then the 60s. And you were one of the people who realized and grasped that revolution immediately, and then you actually went to Paris to work with him directly. And I'd love for you to share what that was like, that moment of intellectual exhilaration.
Well, it was 68. It was a revolution in many ways, and in fact, a revolution which ended Levi-Strauss's dominance in French philosophy, because the watchword of the events in Paris in '68 was structuralism has gone down into the streets.
So we need to explain. So Levi-Strauss stood or stands for a set of presuppositions that are often labeled, or usually, the structuralism. What would be your definition of structuralism, or at least how you guys thought about it?
My definition of structuralism. Well, I had this experience with Levi-Strauss. I gave a seminar in his laboratoire, in his laboratory at the College of France, on some economic activities of Australian Aboriginals and New Guinea people on these trade systems. And I started off by saying I wasn't a structuralist, that in fact I was not going to talk about the exchange of words, which is fundamental in structuralism, or the exchange of women, which was fundamental to his whole notion of social organization and how it developed.
The exchange of women between clans or families, where the exchange of women by marriage creates social relations.
Which he thought of as the beginning of all kinship. But I'm going to talk about economic things, I mean, really the real stuff, not all this la-di-da symbolism. Careful about what they say because they might sound ridiculous. So there's never any discussion after a seminar, no questions. Everybody's afraid of being ridiculous, and I wasn't afraid of being ridiculous, so he liked that. So he liked me and said, but you are a structuralist, he said after my seminar. You are a structuralist because this system you talked about in Australia, it's just like the marriage system I talked about. And this one you talked about in New Guinea, it's like the other marriage system. These are structural phenomena. So I said, what I thought you said, which he did say, that infrastructure, that's economic matters, belongs to Marx. And that we deal with the science of the superstructure, which you said on page 130 of The Savage Mind. And he said, well, I did say that. He said, but we have to change now. He said, my problem was that I learned anthropology at the feet of the American anthropologists like Boas and Lowy, who were dealing with reservation Indians and trying to get out of reservation Indians something that happened in the 1860s. And so they were doing what he called the archaeology of the living. And he said, but now they weren't interested in what was going on in the reservation or the problems of the reservation or the problems of their relationship to the society at large, etc. But now we have to deal with those things. So we have to extend structuralism to the infrastructure. So I said, well, I thought it was a matter of principle, that it doesn't apply to the infrastructure. So I have to ask you, what is structuralism? So he said in French, well, he said, it's good anthropology.
Some of the many high-ranking politicians and world leaders that attended the University of Chicago and its sister school, Northwestern University. Rahm Emanuel, the current mayor of Chicago. Deeply rooted Jewish background, family ties to Israel. His father was actually one of the soldiers that helped colonize the Palestinians to place Israel in 1948. The face behind the University of Chicago and Northwestern University to this day is none other than the Pritzker family, led by current running for governor J.B. Pritzker. His family also has the Jewish background, and they are now funding the educational system of the public schools secretly. This science, or rather mind manipulation, captures one's strength, weaknesses, fears, dislikes, and likes. The main process of anthropology is what world governments use to manipulate the people and keep them in line. They also all started in small tribes, later learned how to gather and manipulate more masses of people through the study of this pseudoscience. The fastest and easiest way to program the masses and nowadays is through the schooling system and also the television. Television programs show all kinds of violence and idiocracy acts. With the American indigenous people waking up, what will be the next agenda that they throw in our face?